What could a 10-year-old boy possibly say that would make a judge, seasoned lawyers, and an entire courtroom fall silent? Not the kind of silence that comes with boredom or routine. No, this was different. This was the kind of silence that grips your chest and makes your pulse skip, the kind where even the ticking of the clock seems too loud. Friends, imagine this. A courtroom buzzing with the usual chaos, papers shuffling, lawyers whispering strategies, the bailiff calling out names, when suddenly, all eyes lock on a single child standing at the center. 10 years old. Small frame. Eyes that carried more weight than any child should. And then, he opened his mouth. No one expected what followed. Judge Caprio, a man who had heard it all, the excuses, the tears, the pleas for mercy, leaned forward ever so slightly, sensing something different in the boy's trembling voice. Lawyers froze mid-sentence. Even the court reporter's fingers hovered above the keys, as if afraid to miss a single word. Because somehow, everyone knew this wasn't going to be just another case. The boy gripped the edge of the podium, knuckles white, shoulders shaking. At first, his words were barely above a whisper, like he was afraid they might break if he spoke too loud. But there was something in his eyes. Fear, yes, but also something else. Something deeper. He started with fragments. Afterthoughts. A sir here, a please there. Judge Caprio didn't rush him. He didn't have to. He just waited. And slowly the tension in the room thickened. What secret could be so heavy that a 10-year-old would carry it into a courtroom? What truth could possibly make hardened lawyers shift uncomfortably in their seats, make strangers in the gallery lean forward, eyes wide, mouths slightly open? Even before the boy revealed anything, people could feel it, the weight of something coming, something that would leave no one the same. Friends, you won't believe what came next. Because in the next few minutes, this trembling child would speak words that stopped time itself. Words that melted the heart of a man who had built his life on law and justice. And when you hear what he said, you'll never forget it. To understand the weight of what was about to happen, you need to know the man at the center of it all, Judge Frank Caprio. Judge Caprio wasn't just any judge. For decades he had sat on the bench of Providence, Rhode Island, known across the country as the compassionate judge. People came into his courtroom expecting justice, yes, but many left with something they never imagined they'd find in a place defined by rules and laws: humanity. He was stern when needed, fair by all measures, yet carried a warmth that reminded people of a grandfather who could scold you one moment and hug you the next. But even Judge Caprio, with all his experience and all his wisdom, had no idea what was about to unfold that day. The morning had begun like any other. The courtroom was alive with its usual symphony, the shuffling of papers, the echo of footsteps on polished floors, lawyers muttering to their clients, the faint hum of ceiling fans pushing the summer air around the room. A bailiff called names from a docket, one after another, ushering in people with traffic tickets, unpaid fines, minor infractions. For most, this was routine. For Judge Caprio, it was just another day of trying to balance justice with mercy. And then they called the next case. At first, nothing seemed unusual. A name. A minor violation. The kind of thing the judge had handled thousands of times before. But when the crowd parted and a small figure stepped forward, heads began to turn. It was a boy. No taller than the podium itself, maybe 10 years old, wearing a shirt slightly too big for his thin frame. His sneakers squeaked against the floor as he walked, slow and hesitant, like someone carrying far more than his own weight. People whispered to each other in confusion. Why was a child here? Where were his parents? The boy reached the front, gripping the edge of the podium as if it were the only solid thing in the world. His eyes darted around the room but avoided the judge's gaze. There was a tremor in his shoulders, the kind that comes from trying not to cry. Judge Caprio watched quietly, his eyes softening. Something about the boy's posture, the way he seemed both brave and terrified, told him this wasn't going to be simple. "What's your name, young man?" the judge asked gently. The boy's answer was barely a whisper. The courtroom grew still. A child standing alone in a room full of adults, carrying a secret no one yet knew, had a way of pulling the air out of the space. People leaned forward, sensing there was more beneath the surface. Judge Caprio glanced at the paperwork before him. Just a simple case, nothing unusual on paper. But the child's trembling hands, the way he clutched them together like he was holding on to something invisible, told a different story. Something was wrong. Very wrong. And though no one yet knew it, the secret this boy carried would change the mood of that courtroom entirely. It would turn an ordinary morning into something people would remember for the rest of their lives. Because behind his quiet voice was a truth so heavy, so unexpected, it would soon leave even Judge Caprio searching for words. The courtroom was quiet now, not the comfortable silence of people waiting, but the tense kind that grows heavier with every passing second. The boy's voice trembled when he spoke, barely rising above the hum of the old ceiling fans. "Sir, I didn't want to come here," he said, his words halting, each one escaping like it cost him something to say it. Judge Caprio leaned forward, his elbows resting on the bench. His eyes softened, but his tone carried the authority of a man who had spent a lifetime searching for truth. "Take your time," the judge said gently. "You're safe here." The boy nodded but didn't look up. His fingers twisted the hem of his shirt, knuckles white, like he was bracing for a storm only he could see. People in the courtroom shifted in their seats. Something about the way he stood there, small, trembling but holding himself like someone much older, made them hold their breath. He spoke again but only in fragments. My mom said," he started then stopped, biting his lip hard enough to leave a mark. Judge Caprio waited. He didn't rush him. He knew when a child needed silence more than questions. Finally the boy whispered, "She couldn't come. She's busy." Busy. The word landed strangely in the room. Busy with what? Why send a 10-year-old to court alone? The judge's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger but concern. He glanced at the paperwork again. A minor violation. Nothing that explained this. "Do you know why you're here today?" the judge asked. The boy hesitated. "Yes, I think so." His voice cracked on the last two words, and for the first time the audience saw his eyes glisten. He blinked rapidly, like he didn't want to give the tears permission to fall. Judge Caprio's instincts told him something was buried beneath this hesitation. Something that had nothing to do with traffic violations or legal fines. The boy shifted his weight from one foot to the other, shoulders hunched. It's not about me," he said softly. "It's about my family." That single sentence changed everything. People in the gallery exchanged glances. A family? What did that mean? The judge leaned back slightly, studying the boy with the kind of patience that comes from decades of hearing stories people were afraid to tell. "Take a deep breath," Judge Caprio said kindly. "You can tell me whatever you need to." The boy nodded again, swallowing hard, but the words didn't come yet. And in that moment, everyone knew, the secret was bigger than they imagined. The boy took a shaky breath, as if gathering every ounce of courage he had left. His small hands clutched the edge of the podium until his fingers turned pale. "My dad, he's sick," the boy said softly, the words falling into the silent courtroom like pebbles into deep water. No one moved. Judge Caprio tilted his head slightly, eyes never leaving the child's face. "Sick? What kind of sick, son?" The boy hesitated. His lips trembled before he whispered, "He can't work anymore. He can't even get out of bed some days." A quiet gasp escaped someone in the back of the courtroom. Lawyers who had been casually flipping through files now looked up, their expressions shifting from disinterest to uneasy curiosity. The boy's voice wavered, but he kept going, his words like a fragile bridge barely holding together. "My mom, she works at night," he continued. "She cleans offices. Sometimes she doesn't come home until the sun comes up." He paused, chewing his lip as though speaking the next part might break him. She couldn't come today because she's working another shift," he said finally. She said we needed the money more than anything." Judge Caprio leaned back slightly, his face unreadable but his eyes heavy with thought. Around the room, people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This was no longer about a simple fine. Something bigger was unfolding. The boy took another breath, and his next words came out in broken pieces, like puzzle fragments everyone was trying to fit together. "My dad, he used to drive me to school," the boy said. "But now he can't drive at all. And we got this letter about a ticket. Mom said she couldn't pay it. She said maybe the judge could help." His voice cracked on the last word. The courtroom felt smaller somehow, like the walls were closing in around the weight of his story. Judge Caprio didn't speak. He just watched, listening, giving the boy space. The child blinked rapidly, fighting the tears that kept threatening to fall. "I thought, if I came here, maybe you'd understand," he said softly. Because we don't have anything else left." He swallowed hard, the words tumbling out faster now as if he couldn't hold them back anymore. "Sometimes, we don't even have lights," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And my little sister, she cries because it's cold." Someone in the gallery covered their mouth with their hand. Another shifted in their seat, looking down at the floor. The boy kept speaking, each sentence heavier than the last. "My mom says, if we pay this fine, we might not have money for rent." A ripple went through the room, small gasps, murmurs quickly silenced. And I thought maybe He paused, voice breaking completely now. Maybe if you knew, you wouldn't make us pay. For a moment, no one breathed. This wasn't just about a ticket anymore. This was about survival. About a family teetering on the edge, held together by the courage of a 10-year-old standing alone in a courtroom full of strangers. Judge Caprio's expression softened, but he still didn't speak. His silence was deliberate, respectful, as though interrupting would be wrong. The boy lowered his eyes, shoulders shaking now. I just wanted to help my mom, he whispered. And with that, the courtroom understood. This child wasn't asking for himself. He was carrying the weight of an entire family on his small shoulders. The secret was almost out. But there was still more, something no one saw coming. The boy's shoulders rose and fell as though every breath hurt. For a moment he just stood there, lips trembling, eyes glistening, clutching the podium like it was the only thing keeping him upright. And then, the truth finally came. We don't have a home anymore, he said softly. The words landed like thunder. The courtroom froze. The hum of the ceiling fans, the scratching of pens, the shuffling of papers, everything stopped. Even Judge Caprio didn't move. His eyes locked on the boy, the weight of those words settling like heavy chains across the room. The child swallowed hard, forcing himself to keep talking. We stay wherever we can, he whispered. Sometimes, with friends. Sometimes, in the car. The murmurs began then, soft, disbelieving gasps from the gallery. A lawyer who had been leaning back casually in his chair now sat forward, elbows on knees, staring at the boy like he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. The boy kept speaking, his voice breaking like glass under too much pressure. My mom works all the time, he said. She says if she stops, we won't have money for food. He blinked hard, his small fists tightening. She said this ticket, this money, would mean we can't pay for a room next week. And there it was. The whole reason he had come here alone. The fine wasn't just numbers on a page. It was nights in the cold. It was empty stomachs. It was a little sister crying because she was hungry, because she was tired of sleeping in the back seat of a car instead of a bed. Judge Caprio leaned back slowly, his hands clasped in front of him, eyes fixed on the boy with an intensity that wasn't anger but something deeper. Something that carried the weight of every hard decision he had ever made. The child's voice grew softer, but the silence in the room made every word sharp as a blade. My dad, he says he's sorry, the boy whispered. He says he wishes he wasn't sick. He says, he wishes we had a house again. The audience shifted, some looking down, others blinking fast like they were holding back tears. The boy finally looked up, his eyes meeting Judge Caprio's for the first time. They were wide, pleading, shining with tears he refused to let fall. I thought, if I came here, maybe you'd understand, he said. Maybe you wouldn't make us pay. The words cracked in the middle, breaking what was left of the room's composure. A woman in the back dabbed her eyes with a tissue. A man near the front swallowed hard, jaw tight. Judge Caprio didn't speak yet. His face, usually so quick with humor or gentle wit, was unreadable. But his eyes betrayed him. They glistened faintly, the kind of shine that comes when emotion pushes too close to the surface. The boy's shoulders sagged like he had finally dropped a weight too big for his small frame. He whispered, almost to himself now, I just wanted my mom to have one less thing to worry about. And with that, the entire courtroom seemed to collapse into silence. No one shuffled papers. No one coughed. No one moved. It was as if the walls themselves were listening. Because in that moment, this wasn't about laws or fines or court procedures. This was about a little boy carrying the world on his back because the adults in his life couldn't anymore. And standing there, in front of a man known for justice and compassion, he had handed over his family's pain in the only way he knew how, hoping for mercy. Judge Caprio leaned forward finally, elbows on the bench, studying the boy with an expression that mixed sorrow, admiration, and something else no one could quite name. The audience waited. The boy waited. Everyone waited. Because whatever the judge said next, it would matter. It would matter a lot. For a long moment, Judge Caprio didn't say a word. His hands rested on the bench, his eyes fixed on the boy who had just handed him a truth too heavy for someone so young. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the softness of a man who had heard thousands of stories but knew this one would stay with him forever. Son, he said gently, you're very brave. The boy's head tilted slightly as if he hadn't expected kindness in a courtroom. Judge Caprio leaned forward. I want you to know something, he continued. You've done nothing wrong. You shouldn't have to carry all this on your shoulders. The boy's lip trembled, but he stayed silent, staring down at his sneakers. The judge glanced toward the paperwork on his desk. The ticket, the fine, the legal formality that had brought this child here. Then he looked back at the boy and shook his head slowly. This fine, he said, doesn't matter more than your family having a roof over their heads. People in the courtroom shifted, sensing what was coming. Judge Caprio's voice grew steadier. I'm not going to make your mother pay this, he said clearly. In fact, I want you to go home today and tell her the judge said to use that money for food, for rent, for your little sister. Not for this ticket. A murmur swept through the room, relief, disbelief, even soft applause from a few in the back before they quickly quieted again. The boy's head shot up, eyes wide, as though he couldn't believe what he had just heard. Judge Caprio smiled faintly. You see, sometimes the law has to look beyond paper and see the people standing in front of it. And today I see a young man who came here alone to protect his family. That takes courage. More courage than most grown men have. The boy blinked rapidly, and for the first time, a tiny shy smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Judge Caprio wasn't finished. He turned slightly toward the bailiff. Let's make sure this family gets some help, he said. I want someone to reach out, see what resources are available. No child should be carrying this kind of burden. The bailiff nodded, already moving to act. Around the room, people dabbed at their eyes. A woman near the front clutched a tissue like it was the only thing keeping her together. A man in the back exhaled sharply, shaking his head in disbelief. The judge looked back at the boy one last time. You did the right thing coming here, he said softly. And I promise you things will get better. The boy nodded slowly, his shoulders relaxing for the first time since he'd walked in. The courtroom, usually a place of stern orders and legal jargon, now felt different, warmer somehow, filled with quiet emotion. And as the case closed, people knew they had witnessed something rare, justice wrapped in compassion. Friends, as the boy left that courtroom, walking slowly toward the door with his shoulders a little straighter than before, the room remained still. It was as though no one wanted to break the spell of what had just happened. For those who witnessed it, this wasn't just another case. It wasn't about traffic fines, paperwork, or legal codes. It was about something far bigger, a 10-year-old child standing up for his family in a world that had given him every reason to stay silent. And at the center of it all was Judge Frank Caprio, a man who understood something many forget. Sometimes justice isn't found in the strictness of the law but in the compassion behind it. Because what good is a courtroom if it can't see the people behind the cases? What good is justice if it doesn't leave room for humanity? That day, a boy taught everyone in that room, lawyers, spectators, even the judge himself, a lesson they would never forget. He taught them that courage can come in the smallest packages. That sometimes the bravest thing in the world is not raising your voice, but speaking through the fear when your voice shakes anyway. And he reminded them, and all of us, that behind every fine, every case, every legal term there is a human story. A mother working herself to the bone so her children can eat. A father sick and unable to stand but still trying to hold his family together. A little boy carrying a secret too heavy for his small shoulders, walking into a courtroom alone because he believed someone might listen. Friends, maybe that's why Judge Caprio's reaction went viral when this story first surfaced. Because people didn't just see a judge waving a fine. They saw what the world needs more of, compassion in places we least expect it. Now let me ask you something. If you had been in Judge Caprio's place, what would you have done? Would you have followed the letter of the law, made the family pay what they owed, and moved on to the next case? Or would you have done what Judge Caprio did, looked into the eyes of that little boy and seen the weight he was carrying? Tell us in the comments. Because stories like this aren't just about what happened. They're about what should happen when ordinary people are faced with extraordinary choices. And if this story touched your heart even a little, share it. Share it so someone else remembers that behind rules and regulations are human beings, each fighting battles the world doesn't always see. As the boy left the courtroom that day, some people cried openly. Others smiled through tears. A few shook their heads as if trying to understand how life could be so cruel to a child and yet so beautiful in the same moment. Cruel enough to put him there, beautiful enough to give him mercy. And Judge Caprio? He simply watched the boy leave, his gavel resting quietly on the bench, his face thoughtful. Maybe he knew that case wouldn't change the system. But it had changed something else, the people who witnessed it. Because sometimes, friends, one act of kindness doesn't just fix a problem. It reminds the world that kindness exists. So as you sit here listening to this story, let it stay with you. Let it make you think about the weight other people carry, the things they don't say, the battles you can't see. And remember this, compassion costs nothing, but to someone else, it might mean everything. Friends, share this story if it touched you. Tell us in the comments what you would have done. And in our next episode, we'll bring you another case that left even Judge Caprio speechless. A moment so powerful it shook the entire courtroom. Don't miss it.